last thing we want to cover today before we wrap up is an update on the pistol brace ban saga in the House of Representatives. So Congress has officially acted, and you reported on that. If you want to tell us what happened there.
Yeah, so the House of Representatives passed a Congressional Review Act resolution to undo the ATF's pistol brace ban by a vote of 219 to 210. So it's fairly close, but they got it across the line. There were 2 Democrats on board and 2 Republicans who voted against it. So it's mostly party line. You had a little bit of crossover. Now it heads to the Senate. And I think there's 2 things here, right? One, it's actually probably going to get further than you might expect, right? The Senate is controlled by Democrats, right? There's a 51-49 Democratic majority at the moment, which generally means that most of the stuff that House of Representatives, which is controlled by Republicans, passes doesn't go anywhere, in terms of legislation. It has no chance of ever even making it to the floor. This does, though. This will get a vote, an up and down vote. There won't be any amendments to it. There won't be any way to stop it from getting a vote because of the way this resolution works. Because it's a Congressional Review Act resolution, which allows Congress basically to go through and look at any rule that was passed recently by a federal agency, and if they want to overturn that rule. Because remember, federal agencies in the rulemaking process, what they're doing is interpreting and implementing laws passed by Congress. So if they do something, if a federal agency creates a rule that Congress thinks, hey, this isn't what we meant, and this doesn't fit with what we said, and when we pass this law, they can naturally, Congress can go in and say, overturn this. This is not right. This is not the proper interpretation of the law we created. And so that makes sense. And so those are privileged motions. So they will get a vote. And I think there's a pretty good chance that it'll pass the Senate too. You need 51 votes. You just need a simple majority. There are 47 Republicans already either sponsoring or co-sponsoring this bill. So the only 2 left out are Murkowski and Collins. Romney is a co-sponsor for people looking at the sort of swing vote types. And so, I've reached out to them. They haven't responded. And then, of course, you have your typical swing votes on the other side, especially on gun issues, in Manchin, who, by the way, did respond and said that he's still looking at the resolution and hasn't made up his mind. Then you have Tester, and you have King from Maine, and you have Sinema from Arizona. So those are the 4 you'd probably go after if you're looking to try and get this across the line. And, I think probably could get 2 of those 4. And I think Collins and Murkowski are going to come around. I mean, there's a pretty significant impact of this rule, right? It affects millions of gun owners,
right,
in a negative way. So, and many of them, as we've reported, have refused to comply with this regulation. So they're sitting under a cloud of potential federal felony charges, right?
Right.
And so I don't think it would be too unrealistic to see this getting to 51. There have already been 5 other CRA resolutions that have made it through the Senate. So it's not a wild possibility that they'll get through on this one too.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I was going to bring that up as well. Like, for example, the gas stove CRA that they got through, and Manchin was very willing to go up against his own party on that and join with the Republican side on that issue. So it's totally not out of the question to see the same on this pistol brace rule, considering a lot of these guys represent very red states, very pro-gun states. So it's quite possible. However, Biden has already said that he's going to veto it, which is, of course, the likely outcome. But you wrote kind of an analysis piece on this issue where this was never going to be undone by a resolution because of that fact. But it's still interesting to see folks on the record voting on this. And 2, I think it just sends a message even though it's sort of a quixotic, project, it still sends a message. So that's interesting.
Yeah, certainly. That's the big hang up, is that this can still be vetoed, right?
Yeah.
And it will be vetoed. Biden has already said he's going to veto it. And you need 2/3 of both houses, which you're not going to get in either house, frankly, because the almost perfect 50-50 breakdown of each house, you're not going to get to 2/3. You need a lot of Democrats at that point. And this is not something that's going to get a lot of Democrats on board. It's something that you'll get a couple of Democrats probably to go for. So that's where it ends on the political side. The congressional action, that's as far as you can expect it to get. It's still, as you mentioned there, a meaningful political tool to have the president forced to veto something that obtained support from moderate Democrats, right? That is still a meaningful political move. It doesn't help you practically, but the good news on the practical side is that the court cases against the pistol brace ban are going very well, right? There's 4 injunctions issued, all of them in the Fifth Circuit, but they protect at least 3 of the major gun rights groups at this point: the Second Amendment Foundation, the Firearms Policy Coalition, Gun Owners of America, and all of their members, which is likely in the millions as far as how many people are actually protected by these injunctions. And you've got the National Rifle Association and the National Association for Gun Rights both trying to intervene in those cases to get their members protected as well, which would add millions more people to that injunction. And is probably going to happen, I would think. You saw this in the ghost gun case where once an injunction was issued against that rule, a number of other companies filed to intervene, Defense Distributed, Polymer 80, and that was granted. So, they're basically suffering the same exact injury as the other gun rights groups. So I don't see any reason why it wouldn't get extended to those groups who, by the way, weren't involved in these official cases because they have other cases going on, right? The NRA has a case in the Eighth Circuit. Plus, you're probably going to see a ruling on the merits very soon. They've got an expedited schedule for the Fifth Circuit Appeals panel that's considering this case, and oral arguments are going to start before the end of the month. So you're likely to see a ruling on the merits very soon in that case. So, it's don't expect that this Congressional Review Act resolution is going to make it into effect, but that doesn't mean it was pointless. And 2, the other avenue for gun rights advocates to get rid of the pistol brace ban is looking pretty positive at this point.